Hello and welcome everyone to the International Black Summit Interview Podcast. My name is Grace Lawrence, and you are with us for our monthly interview podcast session. For those of you who are not familiar with the International Black Summit, we're an organization that was created in 1991, and our purpose is to provide an opportunity for our participants, to bring into being their vision for the Black community and the world. So welcome. This interview podcast, what we do is we interview current and past facilitators and participants of the International Black Summit. And tonight I will be interviewing Glenn Greenidge, one of the co-hosts, my co-host on this program. So I am going to ask Glenn to join me here in the virtual studio, and also then I'll tell you a little bit about him once he's joined me on screen. Welcome, Glenn. Welcome.
Thank you, Jackie Grace. Good to be here.
Good to have you with us. Good to have you. You know, it's such an interesting thing. It's usually the two of us interviewing a third person, or one of us interviewing a third person. But tonight, I really just so excited for the opportunity to share more about you for our listeners, and for me to learn a little bit more about you. We've been working together on the podcasts and on the Sunday Summit share sessions that we have available. They're free every Sunday evening. Um, and I know there are things about you that I didn't know just by reading your biography. So let me share a little bit about that. So let me read your biography for everyone who's listening,
Okay.
just to set the stage before we get into this. So let me do that. Okay. So as I already mentioned, Glenn is a co-host of the podcast, the International Black Summit Interview Podcast, and he's an active member of the Summit Facilitator body. So let me read here. Glenn has been involved in community empowerment, personal development, and entrepreneurship since the 1980s. Glenn started his personal development in 1981, attending and volunteering in leadership positions at what is now Landmark Worldwide. In the 1980s, Glenn was on staff at Landmark Worldwide at the East Coast 6-day advanced course training facility for 2 years. To do this, he took a break from his job at Xerox Corporation and his successful 25-year-plus data processing career. And then in 1990, Glenn and Byron James, also someone familiar with the International Black Summit, the two of them co-founded an organization called the People of African Descent Empowerment Group, PADEG. And it
Byron
initially,
Johns,
is that what did I say?
James, but
Oh,
'cause,
sorry, Byron John. Sorry about that, Byron.
yeah, he
Forgive me,
would never
Byron.
forgive me.
Forgive me, Byron. So Byron and Glenn, they co-founded PADEG, the People of African Descent Empowerment Group, in 1990. And that group's initial mission was to promote leadership training opportunities for people of African descent in the New York Tri-State area. And they offered the courses, structure of courses, and volunteer training, using the structure of courses and volunteer training provided by Landmark at the time. And then PADEG evolved into a second phase. And in its second phase, they established an investment partnership that invested in stocks and mutual funds from 1997 to 2011. Then in 2012, Glenn and Byron collaborated with another facilitator from the International Black Summit, Orrin Saunders, to develop a coaching program called the 90-Day Enhancement Program. And this was developed out of their commitment to developing entrepreneurs and small and medium-sized businesses in the African American community. Glenn currently actively works on economic and community development using his training and development skills in commercial real estate at the Sutphin Boulevard Business Improvement District in Jamaica, New York. In addition, he's chairman of Queens Community Board 12 Economic Development Committee. He is also the board chair and chairman of the Real Estate Committee for Joseph P. Adabo Family Health Center, which is constructing a $32 million expansion using new market tax credits. Glenn has been a member of the International Black Summit since its inception in 1991. He was there at the very, very start. He's been a summit facilitator for over 30 years and has held the accountability for the International Black Youth Summit with Joyce Jones for over 20 years. In 2015, Glenn also developed a youth training leadership training program for the African Center for Community Empowerment, which is a New York-based nonprofit organization committed to helping solve the poverty-related problems of inner-city youth and their families. Glenn has a Bachelor of Science from the Southern New Hampshire University in Management Advisory Services with a dual major in accounting and computer science. We know a whole lot more about you now, Glenn, all the way back to your bachelor degree. So welcome, welcome. You know, this is such a great opportunity to really not just find out more about you as a host of the podcast, but to find out more about you as a host who uses the tools and distinctions of the International Black Summit in your life, in your community work, in your career, in your family, in all of your endeavors, and have been doing that for over 30 years. So for me, I'm really hoping that this interview, this session this evening really gives an insight for anyone who's listening or anyone who's watching us on the YouTube channel into the impact that the tools and distinctions of the International Black Summit can have on really opening up what's available for us to create in our lives and in our communities, because clearly you've created so much. So
Thank you.
so you're welcome. You're welcome. So let me start with where we typically start, which is your first exposure to the International Black Summit. Like the first time you heard about it, the first time you met somebody talking about it. You were there way back in the beginning. So what was that first conversation or first phone call or first event for you?
Well, a gentleman by the name of J.K. Um, Young uh, contacted me, and JK, I'd worked with him at the 6 day. So I was on staff at the 6 day advanced course, and he brought a team up from Boston. He was in Boston at the time. And so I had met him. We had talked, and we had talked about how we could use this work to empower, power our community. And, and so one of the conversations, that was one of the conversations that we had then. And then a couple of years later, I heard from him that they were formulating this conversation, and didn't know what it was going to be named, or who was going to be part of it. But he said that we've got some graduates from the S training and the forum, which is part of Landmark Education. We've got some Black graduates that are coming together, and he says, I'm going to send you the information so you can disseminate it here in New York and let the people in New York know about it. And in fact, we had about 8 people from the New York area, part of this group called People of African Descent Empowerment Group, that we had formulated, because we were basically doing the same thing, but we were only doing it locally. So we were doing it in the tri-state area, and we were basically enrolling people into whatever leadership training that was available at Landmark Education at that point in time. So we had course supervisors, we had seminar people training to be seminar leaders, and so on and so forth. And we were just active in the New York Area Center. And so getting this letter, and I'm going to misquote it, but it basically says that this is like the founding, the forefathers formulating the Declaration and the Constitution of the United States, and they basically said, there's nothing but death in your body should stop you from being at this event. So of course, you have this letter that comes, and of course I shared it with people. They're like, what? These guys are serious. What, what are they up to? What is it about? And the truth is that we weren't sure what it was about, but we knew that it was about empowering people from our community. And we were getting together to have a bigger conversation. So that conversation that I had with JK a few years earlier now going to be a national conversation, and people from all over the country and outside of the country that were part of Landmark were going to be at this event. So, needless to say, we were very excited. We were didn't know what to expect. Really didn't know what we were walking into, what the format was going to be. But we were clear, and let me speak for myself. I was clear that I needed to be there, given the conversation that we had gotten started at the People of African Descent Empowerment Group here in New York. And that was sort of a continuation or expansion of that conversation for me.
So a couple of questions. First, J. Kenneth Young, what was his role at Landmark at the time?
He was I believe he was a seminar director, seminar leader. So he was leading seminars. He was also he was on staff at the time that he sent the letter. He was on staff in Chicago, so he'd moved um, New England uh, to uh, to Chicago, and now was operating out of Chicago, and was doing some organizing with the Boys and Girls Club, I believe, and some other organizations there in Chicago. So he is now squarely in the conversation. And from what I understand, that was the place that had the most activity around the preliminary conversation leading up to October 7th, 1991, which was actually the first event that was formulated that had everybody on. So the other thing I
So let
might
me ask
add,
you.
yeah, the other thing I might add is that that there were some preliminary conversations on the phone, and back at that time you couldn't do conference calls. Conference calls weren't, so we had the daisy chain, and after four or five people, you'd have to keep repeating it to the next five, to the next five, to the next five, because sometimes we had like 20 or 30 people on the call. So it wasn't very efficient. So it was clear that we had to get together and meet. And October 7th was the date that we had put together for this meeting.
Yeah. Daisy chain for anybody from a younger generation is like three-way calling, and you three-way call and the other person three-way calls and the next person three-way calls. So you're just um uh, creating a conference call by people three-way calling each, and that's the daisy chain. It's old technology.
Old technology,
we
very
have
old technology.
we have so much more available to us now. So my question is, if you were to go back to the man you were in 1990, 1991, when these conversations were happening. So you were part of the PADEG group, and that tri-state area group was looking at using transformational tools in the African American community. This conversation comes along to say, let's do something similar, but on a national scale inside the African American community. If you were to go back to the man you were then and look at the man you are now and the tools you have now and what you have experienced through the International Black Summit over the last 3 decades, what would you what would that man say
Hmm.
about where you are and where things are today?
Well, the first thing that I've got to say is that I didn't have the wherewithal that I have now. Um, we started out, I was just beginning to lead conversations from the front of the room. We had our own meetings that we had set up at PADEG. And so I was just getting comfortable with that whole leading and trying to steer people through a conversation. Um, what I learned since then is to manage my mind and to be with what's in front of me rather than trying to force fit a conversation down a particular path. So there was a lot of things that I've learned since then around facilitation, around being with people, around having people left empowered. Now, I'm still not perfect about it. I think I'm a little bit better at it, but I still leave, um, from time to time, I can leave people in an upset, and that's not my commitment. So I think I'm more refined. I'm certainly more skilled in the technology of the International Black Summit because at that point in time, there was no technology for the International Black Summit. We were just all based in Landmark. Now, I had gotten some great training at Landmark, um, and the thing that I'm also left with is there's something special about having technology developed by people of Black African descent with a commitment to have that be communicated and expressed in our community. And so I think that if I were to compare myself to then to now, those are some of the things, obviously, that um, have changed in terms of my relationship to transformation. And of course, I'm a little older, a little wiser, wiser from the mistakes that I've made, and to one of the things that I've got to say at this point in time, for me, one of the things, in the International Black Summit, we talk about an inquiry or a discussion point that we have from year to year. And when I look at um, over these years, when I look back at that discussion point, we had several years of be with what is. And so that be with what is conversation was one of the pivotal points in my relationship to myself, in terms of allowing myself to fully own and be responsible for the life that I have. And certainly, if it's not looking the way I'd like it, then do something about it rather than just complain and and uh, and squawk about it. Yeah, go ahead. You got a question there? Go ahead.
Well, I was thinking, first of all, I wanted to say that I think you're selling yourself a little short in terms of leaving people empowered. You regularly leave me empowered. We're teammates in what we do on this podcast and also in the other sessions that we co-facilitate together. And in our team meetings, I feel like you make it a point to ensure that our sessions and our meetings always end in a space of empowerment. And so I get that has probably become so much a part of who you are and who you be in the world that when it's out even this little amount, it's going to be a big thing and obvious to you, even when it might be completely unnoticeable to other people. But because it's an area of mastery for you, that being even out of alignment slightly in that area is going to be, noticeable to you in ways that is probably not noticeable to the people around you. So, but thank you for being that.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. I've been trained well by by the people around me.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things for sure in the summit, and looking at your participation in PADEG, which was about empowerment in the African American community, and you fulfilling that role there and in many different roles that you fill in the community, including in the summit. So let me ask you, we talk about these tools in the summit, and our summit tools include things like the annual inquiries that you just referred to, the discussion points or the questions. We sometimes call it an annual question or annual inquiry. So each annual summit event, there is an inquiry, a question that we ask ourselves and explore and investigate over the subsequent year until the next annual summit event. And then we look to see inside the facilitators generate what the next, listen for what the next annual question is. And so looking at these tools, the questions, the distinctions, the declaration, and the vision, the purpose providing an opportunity for participants
To bring into being
to bring into being
their vision
their vision for the Black
for the Black
community in the
community in
world.
the world. Yeah.
What's your vision?
Well, my vision is really health, wealth, and abundance available for all. And
Mm,
so when I look at that, for me, it's about creating a level playing field for everybody, especially for people from our community who feel disenfranchised or left out or not certainly not included. And I think that part of that conversation really is an internal conversation. It starts internally, and I guess if I look back, we talked about the inquiry, but also the distinctions, which are part of the tools that we use inside of the International Black Summit. The first one that I had to get a hold of is that there's no right way to be. And so the tools and the distinctions, these are words that we use, but we use them in a particular way. So if you look them up in the dictionary, it may not be the same way that we particularly use them inside of the International Black Summit. But the distinction, no right way to be, was a very confrontational one for me because after these 25 years being a systems analyst, being in data processing is very structured. It's there. There is a right way to be inside of that, the context of that conversation and that training. And I've been in data processing since high school. So I
mm,
started programming in high school. Um, we ended up having a terminal, and so we were hooked up, and I was writing COBOL, Fortran, and RPG, which aren't used this day and age anymore. But back then, those were the latest and greatest programming languages, and so no right way to be had me to stop and not try and figure it out and not be having a strategy or agenda of how to figure it out. No right way to be had me stop in my tracks and allow life to contribute to me. And what I got to see in allowing myself to for life to contribute to me, to see that there were many other ways of getting to the finish line or getting that result, most of which I hadn't have a clue about. So um, no right way to be had me really open up to results and situations that I would have never embarked on my own. And so it allowed me to expand my looking, my listening, and my ability to be with what is.
it's interesting. So, you've mentioned two distinctions already so far, two distinctions that we use in the International Black Summit. Be with what is being one of the distinctions that we use to really uncover, and it's a transformative tool. And also no right way to be, another distinction from the International Black Summit. And my question is, when you look at those distinctions and maybe even others, and you look at your vision of health, wealth, and abundance available for all, including yourself, because you're in all,
Yes.
how have you used those distinctions or other summit tools to generate that for yourself? Like, do you have any specific examples of how you've generated health, wealth, and abundance for yourself or around you? using the tools and distinctions of the summit?
Well, it's interesting because over the years, I had about I was working as a consultant. Um, After I left the 6 day, went back into the data processing field, left the company, and actually started my a consulting firm. And I had a consulting firm from probably about 1995 to about 2001, where 9/11 hit. And after that, there was, there was a drought. There was a huge consultant. All the consultants got cut off, and I went for about almost 10 years not really working. And so in that period of time, of course, the first thing is, your self-worth. Well, you're not working, what you're gonna do, how you're gonna survive. And so the tools of the summit had me really uh, keep myself grounded. And what I discovered is that even though, and here's another thing that was part of my consciousness at that point in time. I was making some nice dollars. So for me, if I didn't have $200 in my pocket, I was, something was wrong, you know. And so of course I didn't have $200 in my pocket in that period of time. And so so it really had me look at what was around me, and I began to look at the wealth and the abundance that was in my community. And so I got to discover all of these things that were around me, the services in the library, people I knew, all these different resources that I had access to, that had I not stopped having a job per se, that I would have never discovered. So in that, I really got to get a sense of myself. I certainly got a sense of community, and realize that, wait a minute, if there are all these resources available, then why are people not connecting? And which was the same reason why I wasn't connected. So it really had me begin to look at, what's this conversation called economic development? Well, economic development is about supporting businesses, and people who were in commerce, or who are buying, selling, doing something inside of the community. And that was the initiative that helped us start the coaching program, the 90-day enhancement program, and being the leader in my life. Those are the two coaching programs that Byron and Orrin, the three of us, would talk on a Sunday afternoon, probably for 2 or 3 hours every Sunday. We talk about the different issues that Black entrepreneurs had, what were they up against, so on and so forth. And so that those conversations had me really venture into real estate, and economic development. So I now use that track to begin to fulfill on my vision. And so that the wealth and abundance, and so you also have to remember too, that I just come out of PADEG. We were about 15 people, 15 members, and we had about $250,000 in equities that we managed, that we had built up in that time period, and were managing, and actually were beating the market. So if the market went down 10, we probably only went down maybe 6 or 7, if that much. And so, if the market went up, we went up as well. Um, but we had, relatively conservative investments, and we were just thinking about getting into real estate. So we were strictly stocks. We didn't do any bonds. We just but different kinds of stocks, and so we did very very well. And we used the not credit union. What's the group where you as a community have a little investment club. So we investigated an investment club association and took some training and then trained all our people. In fact, the late Bill Patterson and I were responsible for training of our group because, of course, when you get into stocks, I thought I knew something about stocks and really discovered that there was so much that I didn't know, even though I had this accounting background. There was so much more to the stocks and investigating them and so on and so forth. So we did the training. So that was kind of like the wealth piece of the conversation. Then I had the abundance piece, and quite frankly, I've been probably dealing with the health piece these last few, maybe 10 years or so, being a little bit more focused around health and eating well and exercising and so on and so forth. So all of those areas have been supported by the work that I've been doing inside of the International Black Summit, and Landmark, and inside of economic development. So all of those things are really tied together.
I really hear, we mentioned a couple of times now the be with what is distinction. And I really hear that very strongly in what you just shared. After having your consulting business, then going through the dry period and being with what is during the dry period, which is something that for many of us as human beings is a challenge. We just will do anything to avoid being with what was true for us in that moment. And we'll find all kinds of distractions. We'll run ourselves ragged in ways that are actually not taking us towards our vision. And we're just spinning our wheels, rather than stopping and taking a moment and just allowing ourselves to be with what is. And inside of that, you sharing that you were able to see all of the abundance around you. Living in North America, I'm in Canada, you're in the United States. We're in capitalist societies. And so the conversation around wealth and abundance is often just about money. But you had the opportunity in that moment to be present to abundance at the level of community,
Hmm. Yeah.
present to all kinds of other types of abundance that are not financial, and that I think we often disregard in this society. We may not be disregarding it so much in the future, in my opinion. I think we may be moving into a future where people are reminded about the value of other types of abundance. I think we may be heading to that type of a future. But I'm really present to the value that being able to be with what is provided you in that moment, not just your ability to see the abundance around you, but your abundance to then listen for what was next, as opposed to running after a distraction. Being able to listen, be quiet, and listen for what's next, and then move in that direction. I just find that really powerful. Again, for me, it's just a demonstration of the power of these distinctions.
Yes, the thing, and you said it just now. It's being able to listen and notice what's available. Again, noticing is another one of the distinctions. Is to just to be able to kind of check it out for yourself. You kind of like, that self-examination. Is this working? Is this not working? How did I leave that person? Are they now upset? Are they, empowered? Are they, satisfied with their interaction? And, all of those things, kind of come at you. And, over the years, you get better and better at working with them. The other tools that I love, um, kind of closing with the young people, the work I do with the youth, accountability, responsibility, and ownership. And I was in a podcast yesterday around mental health, and one of the things that was very evident were the people who were successful in resolving their issues were being accountable and responsible and owning their diagnosis. And so I think that if anything in life, if you're accountable, responsible, and you own the result that you have, you're now in a powerful place where you can now change whatever there is to change as a possibility. Um, and and transformation for me is the ability to have a conversation, but know that that conversation is not cemented, and that I can change that conversation in a moment. And
Mm.
especially if it's not empowering me. So, I have the opportunity to change the what I'm listening to in my head and be able to now position it in a way, in a place that works for me. And so I think that the training and the distinctions and the inquiries and all of the work that I'm doing on myself um, allows me to also impact the people around me because they're getting some benefit to the results that I'm having as well.
Yeah, I just so appreciate what you said around accountability, responsibility, and ownership, and the relationship between those distinctions and empowerment. As self empowerment, community empowerment. Uh, those distinctions are everything to me.
Yeah.
To me, my own personal opinion, they're everything to empowerment. To not have accountability, so to be lacking in accountability, lacking in responsibility, and being unwilling to own, and then to claim to be empowered, for me, I just don't know how those could ever be in alignment. And those three items are foundational to empowerment. And anytime that we, or anytime that I, is speaking from the I is one of our distinctions in the summit. Speaking from the I, don't talk for other people. Don't talk for other people. Speak for myself. So for me, anytime that I feel disempowered, all I have to do is look and say, what am I not taking accountability for? What am I not being responsible for? What am I not willing to own? And once I can look at that and really see what's there that I'm not taking on, that I'm avoiding, that I'm turning away from, that is the source of my disempowerment. It's just really, I just to have access to these kinds of tools, it's power. It's just beautiful. I wouldn't want to live life without them.
Yeah, me either. Me either. And then the other thing to add to that is empowering your vision. There's
Mm.
something very powerful about getting connected to what it is that you're up to in life. What is your gift? What is it that you're here to gift the planet? Because you are unique and you've got a unique gift that only you can provide to the planet. And so how are you going to do that? What's in the way of stopping you? And you have these tools to support you in the development, in the excitement, in the discovery. Because again, I'm not trying to figure out how to get there. I'm allowing the universe to contribute to me, to give me something that I probably wouldn't have thought about, couldn't have thought about, didn't have any access to, but the universe provided it to me and it said, "Oh, well, wait a minute. Have you looked here? What about over here?" And again, that whole expansiveness that's available that becomes now kind of, I want to say, like a game, because it makes it fun. You know, I've discovered things that I had no idea um, that were possible. Um, and I got to tell you something. When people get their vision, they're on fire. They're on fire. There's something just physically, I've seen people change physically when they got their vision. You know, it's kind of like the happy genes kind of woke up, and people are just, you know, are clear, and are clear what their purpose in life is, and begin to formulate plans around getting what it is that they want out of life inside of that vision.
So great. That's so great. We've talked a little bit about, distinctions, and we talked about your first interaction with the summit. So you have been to probably most of the annual summit events since the inception. Do you know how many
I've
of them
missed
you've missed?
three. I've missed
You've
three.
missed
I've missed three.
you've missed three. Wow.
And
So yeah.
Oren Saunders is the only one that I know of that has been to every single one that we've had.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
So yes, so I've missed three, and I've suffered through missing those threes. But now, you know, when I look at the just the because there's something special that occurs at every single summit. Yes, we have a similar format. We may have a different question. We may be dealing with some different things, but there's something powerful that occurs. And I got to say this because in the International Black Summit, there's not an agenda that we are driving. There's not a book. There's not a script that we're now, go to the next point, to the next point, to the next point. We're actually listening. We're listening to the space. We're listening to what is showing up in the space because there's something about our people that is very unique. We are about energy, and that energy flows in different directions. And you want to kind of monitor it. Again, the space will give you what it's asking for if you're listening hard enough and good enough. And that really is the training for being a facilitator in the International Black Summit is your listening skills. You're listening for what's being said, you're listening for what's not being said, and you're listening for what's between the lines. So it's we've gone um, from a passive listening to a really full-bodied listening. We're really listening intently to what's being said and what is the issue, and we use the tools to navigate or to bring out, because we'll never tell you you should do this or that. That's not how we facilitate. We facilitate by asking you a question and having you look to see what is there that you see. And oftentimes we'll follow it up, well, okay, where are you now? You know, are you in a different place? You're in the same place? Do you see something? You see an opportunity? And we work with people. We work with people and allow them to see for themselves what it is that is their issue, that is their concern, that is their confront. Because sometimes you're confronted by your own activities, your own action. It's like, wow, did I really do that? Oh, oh, that was ugly. But I noticed it, and so now I can do something about it. I can at least clean it up. I can say, look, I'm sorry for what I said or what I did, or what have you. But you begin to, again, that ownership, accountability, and responsibility. You now have a stake in the outcome that showed up in your space, and now you could do something about it.
The thing that for me I'm really present to as you speak is the level of respect that the summit conversation has for each person. Like you said that the summit does not tell anybody what to do. Like this is, steps 1, 2, 3 for your life. Like there's an innate recognition that no one can tell another person what their vision is, what their purpose is, what will drive them, what calls them forth. You cannot figure that out by just looking at someone. Only that person knows their inner world. Only that person knows what's being drawn out from the depths of who they are. And so the respect for that I think is inherent in the summit conversation. Like, we know that we cannot tell you. We know that you are the only person who is the expert on you, and that we can give you these tools so that you can facilitate the blossoming and the expression and the expansion of all of who you are in all its glory. But we cannot tell you what that is. We cannot tell you which direction that's asking to go in. Only you, in your own essence, know what that is, and the summit conversation really respects that, and I value that personally.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let me ask you, what was your favorite annual summit event? You've attended all of these annual summit events, probably close to 30 of them, if not
Mhm.
30 of them.
Yeah.
And so, what was your favorite one, or favorite one or two?
Going to Africa was a big one for me. I went to Kenya and I went to South Africa, and
Both
those
of
two
those were in the 1990s, right?
were in the '90s. Those trips were very revealing to me. I had this notion, you're sold this notion of jungle and bush, and everything being so backwards, and then you go and looks like
Yeah,
looks like a
skyscrapers.
it looks like a city in Cleveland. I mean, it's not a whole lot of difference. Um, but the thing, I guess for me, the reality for me was that I was somehow hoping to be embraced by my African brothers and sisters, and I was very disappointed that I was looked upon as an American first,
Mm.
which I am. But I mean, but I thought there would be some connection. We came from you. You're original, and I'm part of that conversation, and it wasn't. And so it was something that I had to deal with personally. That was like my personal kind of pushback. Um, but the other part of it was that, that I got to discover that they're no different than us. That's the other piece of it. They were struggling with what they were struggling with. They had some cultural issues that they were working with, and or governmental, cultural, and of course, you've got tribalism is the big thing over in Africa, and having black people work together. So that was an interesting conversation to be part of. And then the other thing was that I discovered that that my little Black American world um, didn't translate everywhere in the world, and there were things that I had to learn, and had to and we, as the International Black Summit, learned about ourselves and about this conversation of empowerment that we are now carrying, because we're called the International Black Summit. So and and black is a North American distinction that is different, that shows up differently in South America and in Africa, and certainly in some of the European black Africans differently. So there was a lot of changes. So those were um, exciting, pivotal events for me personally, and I think for the International Black Summit. We went to Brazil, and they didn't even have a context of black. They had brown, but they have
Black
mulatto.
Brazil
They
has a
had
pretty
this.
clear they have a pretty clear context of black now. I don't
Well,
um,
back then, back then, it was quite interesting just to see how they related to themselves and how they related to us, and so that those I mean, as I said, each summit had its own uniqueness, that had its own gift for me personally, and a gift to the whole International Black Summit, because as an organization, going to the different places made a huge difference in how we facilitated, how we heard ourselves, and how we can support people in being empowered. So all of those things kind of, and of course we were in Jamaica, and we were in Guyana, and
Jamaica was
Belize.
my first summit.
Jamaica was your first summit, yeah, and
Jamaica was
and
my first summit, yeah.
and that was interesting because I had a relationship with Jamaica prior to, but certainly being there and just didn't know about the vortex and the energy level of I discovered the energy level of the Jamaican people was related. I say was related to this is Glenn Greenidge speaking. It was related to the vortex, the
What
energy.
vortex are you talking about?
Well, there's Jamaica's actually on an energy spot, just like Sodoma, out
Oh,
west.
okay. Oh, I
So
didn't know that.
Jamaica's in an energy spot, and so what
Well,
I
that doesn't surprise me because
no,
Jamaica, my heritage is Jamaican, and we're little but with Talawa.
that's right, with Oliver,
we
exactly.
we we punch above our weight class.
Yes, definitely, definitely. So that was interesting because the first time we were in a big hotel, and then the next time we were in Top Hill, which is just a small town, literally on top of the hill, in one of the parishes, St. Catherine, and the people were just wonderful. I mean, they were loving it. They were enjoying it. The kids, we had fun with the kids there, and it's just. I think that in going to all these places, there was a relationship to community that I got connected to, and and that I'm still connected to because I'm still doing a lot of work with community, and so traveling around the world, understanding that people have a different come from than I do, allows me to be, again, to be with what is, to know that there's no right way to be, and so and the other conversation, other distinction is there's no out there. So whatever you're seeing over there is reflective of you. That conversation at your point, you got the three fingers pointing back at you, and you got the one or two fingers pointing in that direction. So as you look, as you be with yourself in a way that, again, to notice and to really begin to self-evaluate what it is that you're up to and what you're doing. The other thing I want to say about community that I've discovered probably in the last 7 or 8 years now, being back here in New York, is that when you have a shared vision for that particular community, then things work a lot better. What I noticed or what I discovered was that a lot of the not-for-profits were coming from scarcity, coming from, yes, I've got a great idea, and I want funding for my idea, and I don't care about any other non-for-profit, rather than, you know what? Here's the vision for our community. Where do you see yourself inside of that vision? And once you have this community vision, people then begin to partner up with each other. Adversaries now become in partnership because they realize, yeah, you got something similar to what I'm up to, so let's work together rather than squabbling for the same pot of money. Let's work together and get a bigger pot. And I think that this vision conversation is critical to our people and our conversation in our communities, because if you don't have a vision and your vision isn't big enough, then you get into mischief. And the mischief that I've seen in my community here in New York, in Jamaica, New York, has been one of, well, who's got the money? Who's got the ding dong on this? And I want to find out, because that's who I want to talk to, rather than let's see what your piece is. Let's work together, and we can all have it all. And that's the conversation that I'd love to be in.
Yeah, I just want to underscore what you're saying there about vision and the importance of vision. And, many people in the Black community uh, are steeped in the Christian tradition. And there's the scripture that says, where there is no vision, the people perish, which is, a scripture I've heard, I couldn't tell you how many times in my life. And yet the number of times I've heard it said just sort of like in the abstract, like an abstract conceptual thing, as opposed to really looking at it from the practicality of it. The practicality, we at the summit, our purpose is around vision, creating, providing an opportunity for participants to bring into being their vision for the Black community and the world. And the practical aspects of vision, like you were talking about in the nonprofit community in your community, and when there's a collective vision, how that then dictates how the organizations interact with each other. And in our community, as individuals, as families, as communities, since the pandemic, there's been a lot of conversation around mental health and people who are um, actually have mental illness or may not have mental illness, but are still having their own emotional struggles. And how much of that, maybe not on the chemical illness side, but just on the emotional side, how much of that is potentially related to a lack of vision, like people looking at their lives or looking at their world and not seeing anything to to co-create, to build towards, to look forward to, you know what I mean? Like, what's the vision? Just looking out at the world as it is and being dissatisfied, as opposed to looking at and clarifying what that vision is that they are standing for. And that is a vision that's worth bringing us all together to co-create. So I agree with you. All of that to say that I completely agree with you on the power of vision and the importance. I for me now more than ever at this particular time in the world, for us each as individuals, families, and communities to be clarifying the visions that are calling us for.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to say about a vision and the vision work that we do here at the International Black Summit, um, sometimes the vision seems daunting and seems like unreachable, but if you focus on it long enough and take action consistent with that vision, you'll be surprised how easily you begin to chip away at it. And again, we use the tools of the summit, the distinctions, the inquiries, the conversation, to keep ourselves on track, to keep ourselves focused on the results that we want to produce. Because we're going to have disappointments, we're going to have letdowns, we're going to have things go sideways maybe, but it's not the action that's taking place. It's who you're going to be about that action. What are you going to now? Are you going to now fall on the floor on a tantrum, or are you going to pick yourself up and say, okay, good, that didn't work. I know not to do that. Let me try something else. Whole different context to getting back up. And when you've got that vision, it supports you in staying focused. And again, the work that we do here is about you getting the results that you want out of your life.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things that I notice for myself when I think about vision, and I've been refining my vision. Like I have a particular vision. My vision is freedom, abundance, and joy for all. But beyond that, I'm also in the process of looking at what is the vision that I'm standing for the world, for the future. As we're, for me, I feel like we're in this, turbulent times. And when I look at the future, what is the world that I want to see? Not just what I don't want to see, but what do I want to see? Not just the not that and not this, but this, and this, like what are those things that I'm standing for? And that I hope that we as a society can develop into. And so for me, I've really noticed that recently I've really been looking at my life as holding the leg of the relay race for my ancestors. Like my ancestors ran their leg of the race, and they did what they did, and they held what they did, and they made the contributions that they did, such that I'm here now. And I'm here now in generally improved circumstances relative to what most of them experienced not too long ago. Well, I mean, a couple of generations ago,
Oh,
a
yeah.
few generations ago. So, right. So, relative to a few generations ago, I am in better circumstances. And I'm not just looking at better circumstances as the next generations of my family, but for the world. Like, what's the world? Like, we as Black people, I'm I'm stepping on your interview, Glenn,
That's
but
go on,
we
that's fine.
but we as Black people have provided a major contribution to how humanity interacts with certain concepts. We have, as Black people, have lived certain experiences that has then made humanity be able to look at the concepts of freedom and liberty in new ways. And so I feel like we are still on that trajectory, and we've made movement over the last 150 years, and there's more movement, or 200 years, and there's more movement to go in terms of what that really means and looks like for all of humanity across the globe. And so I'm in my leg of the race. And um and so the idea that the vision that I'm holding is something that has to, all of that to say that the vision that I'm developing feels like a vision that doesn't have to be fulfilled in my lifetime. Like it, like movement towards it in my lifetime. But will we get 100% there in my lifetime? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I'm not saying yes or no, but even if it doesn't, my commitment is to run my leg of the race.
Yeah, and see that's an important conversation. It is no matter the result in your lifetime, you're inside of your commitment, you're going to do the things that are going to be working towards having that commitment be fulfilled. And again, that's your leg of the race. That's your piece that you contribute and add on to it. And we all hope that we could see our visions to the finish line. But as you said, we may not. But um, if I can rest my head at night and know that I've done something to move that forward, to move that dial forward, then I'm feeling satisfied and feeling that I've accomplished something. And not that I'm done, not that it's over, but I can go to bed that day, that night, and know that, feel good about myself and ready to wake up the next day to move it, a little bit more forward. So,
And we may see it in our lifetime. I'm not saying we won't. That's for
absolutely.
sure. I'm not saying we won't see it in our lifetime. We may.
Yes, with that intention, it's all about, that's the other part about it, keeping our attention on the prize, what it is. And I love what you said earlier, focus on what you want, not what you don't want. And that is such an important part for me, for keeping myself empowered, because I can think of all of the different scenarios, and if I'm focused on the negative, then, that whole conversation, your cup is half full or half empty. What are you focusing on? And I promise you, if you're focusing on the opportunity, then you will begin to see opportunity in front of you rather than anything else. And you, when you see that you feel good about yourself and you feel motivated and you're now ready to do some more, work. And then that really is, that's the thing. If I look back in all those years, just keep moving forward. How does the mouse eat the elephant? One bite at a time. So you just keep moving it forward and you'll get there, and you'll see movement. You know, the thing that is upsetting for most of us, and I'll speak for myself, is that I focus on what I didn't get done, and sometimes I forget to focus on the accomplishments. And somebody will have to remind me and say, you know, you did that, and the other. And I was like, what? And I look back and I was like, oh yeah, I did do that. I did, so I think it's important to have those kind of conversations, and certainly it's an important conversation. We have a youth summit and we have a young adult summit,
Yeah,
and
so let me ask you about that. You went at the top of the at the session, the interview. I read your bio and mentioned that you have been heading up the International Black Youth Summit with Joy Jones for over 20 years. So I wanted to ask you about the Youth Summit, the International Black Youth Summit, and your involvement over this time, particularly like where you see what's your vision? Let me ask you this. What is your vision in this moment? What is your vision for the International Black Youth Summit? What's your vision for the Youth Summit?
my vision for the youth summit is for us to bring back some young people who are interested in taking over the program from Joy and I. We had some very dynamic youth, 14 to 15, all the way down to 8, um, and um, and they developed the curriculum, which we still use parts of it. We've modified it, but the the curriculum is the curriculum is so killer that it still works. I mean, that's the thing.
Fantastic.
It's very fundamental. It has youth look at, their relationship to the Black community. One of the things that we do in there, we ask them, it says, well, what do what do people say about the Black community? You know, what do Black people say about the Black community? What do you say about the Black community? And they begin to formulate and understand their thoughts about the Black community, and understanding that none supersedes anything else, but it's how do you think about yourself, really, in the bottom line. And so we use that kind of work to develop themselves. We also make it a point to have them stand up and speak to the other youth, so that they would actually, so when we're in person, we actually have them stand up and turn around and speak to the whole body of youth. Now, of course, since we've been virtual, it's not quite as easy to do that, but we still have the same kind of intention around having them speak, because one of the things I listen, that's one of the reasons why I did this work back in 1981. I wasn't comfortable speaking in public. I'd be in a meeting, and I'd know that, they say, some technical thing, and I know the answer. I wouldn't raise my hand. I'd wait till the end of the meeting and then walk over to the person and tell them the answer, that, to the issue. But I wouldn't raise my hand. And one of my
I would have
coworkers
never
noticed
guessed, Glenn. This is
well,
what, this is what you call transformation, right? The summit is a transformational conversation, and you're so transformed in that area. It's almost like you didn't even remember that you used to be that way.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it really, I had to look back and say, wow, that is a change, that, and all the work that I've done since then is about leading, speaking and leading. Because I was, I didn't talk much. Some people say I still don't talk much, except, in certain situations. But the opportunity really is, if I'm going to speak, I'm going to move the room forward. So I'm always listening from a standpoint of what's going to move this room forward. What's going to, because it's not about, you know, um, re-engaging and, oh yes, you're right or you're wrong, but it's like, well, what do we need to move the conversation? And I've been able to do that as a facilitator in the International Black Summit with the youth. I've also been able to do it in various community organizations that I'm working with, that I'm leading sometimes or not leading, but able to impact the conversation. And so, getting back to the youth, having them be able to speak their vision and to begin to understand that they're responsible for their lives, the accountability, responsibility, and ownership. And we have those kind of conversations with them about their parents, about their teachers, about other people who are in the adults that are in their lives. And you can hear the conversation after 2 or 3 days inside of this conversation. You can begin to hear them formulating their lives. I know we had a conversation with some youth in Guyana this past August. And, you know, 13, 14-year olds. This one guy said he's going to be an engineer, and he is looking to create a economic system that is sustainable, that helps the planet. Now,
Oh,
y- you
get to
know,
work, please, kid. I
you
love,
know,
I love it.
13 years old, and then if I go back, we went to Anguilla probably in 2006. This 7-year old says to me, I want to be a forensic scientist. Give me a break. 7 years old? I don't know nothing about forensic
Watching a lot of
scientists.
CSI,
It's
watching a
like,
lot of
yeah,
CSI.
she's catching CSI or what, it's the what I'm always amazed at is their ability to adapt, and much quicker. Of course, they've got different set of tools and so on and so forth, but I wasn't thinking about any of that stuff. Um, the last time that we went to Guyana in person, we had the youth develop, what would you want to see, what's your vision for your community?
Mm,
They
love
came
it.
up with that. I want a shopping center, a movie theater, a pool, an exercise club, or someplace where they go. And I'm like, wait a minute, they're developing a city here. These are little kids that are, you know, haven't had a master's degree in developing communities, but they had a whole community economics that worked. that created a money supply within the community that they were
I love
living.
it.
It's like, so the work that we do with the youth is just phenomenal. And then if I look at the youth that we worked with over the years, lawyers, um, uh, parents now, having their own kids. We had one guy who he and his wife have three autistic kids,
And we
and
interviewed them on this podcast.
we interviewed them on the podcast, and because of the work that they did inside of the youth summit, they now had a capacity to listen to their autistic kids in a way that supported the kids and supported each other. Uh,
I just want to interrupt you for a second. As we go deeper into what some of the past participants of the Youth Summit have created in their lives and in their communities. I mean, really, really impressive lives that many of them have gone on to lead. Just a couple of things. I wanted to go back to something that you said about speaking to always move the conversation forward. And as you were saying that, like you've gotten to a point where that's what you're always listening for. You're listening for when you speak, for it to be a contribution that moves the room forward, that moves things forward. And as you were saying that, what I was present to was the internal security to not be speaking from ego, you know, that you are not like the conversation and your contributions to the conversation are not about you, not about you, not about impressing people, not about having people think that you're smart, not about being the one to present the idea, just being a contribution to the space and the internal security it takes to come from that place, as opposed to, when we're insecure, and often many of us are as young people, right? And when
mhm.
we're insecure, it's like, okay, if I say this, will that be will that get people's approval? If I, or if I say it this way in a deep voice, will I seem more commanding? Or, like all of those kinds of things that are not about just like what's the conversation we're having and what's going to move the conversation forward, move the room forward in ways that have absolutely nothing to do with me. It's just about what we are creating or what the space is asking for and the internal security that sits on top of. Do you see what I'm pointing to?
Absolutely. And for me, if I'm inside of my vision, then the personal stuff just falls away because it's a bigger conversation than me. See, one of the things that we say about a vision is that it's something that I can't do by myself. I Health, wealth, and abundance available for all. I can't do that by myself. I need partners. I need partners out in the world to be able to do that. So if I've got my attention on that, then that's what I'm listening for rather than promoting Glenn. Oh, Glenn is this and Glenn is that and so on and so forth. And you know, I often smile when I hear people, well, I got this and I got that and I got that. Okay, are you moving the conversation forward?
Right. Because
Usually not.
any one of us can move the conversation more forward, whether we have this, you just pointed to, so this takes us back to the youth summit. You pointed to 7-year-olds and 13-year-olds who are moving the conversation forward.
Yes.
And the examples of past participants of the youth summit, like you talked about the couple that we interviewed on this podcast, and how they are moving the conversation forward with their autistic children, and that they are contributing to the community of parents who have autistic children. They have a website, they have a
A talk
podcast.
show. Right. Yeah. Mhm.
So you guys can, anybody who's listening or watching on YouTube, you can check out the podcast interview with them, and you'll have links to their resources. Also, we have a podcast interview with a past Youth Summit participant who's now an author and a professor. We have an interview, podcast interview with another uh, um, Youth Summit past participant, who's also engaged in all kinds of fantastic things in their life, like just really creating beautiful, beautiful lives and really major contributions to their communities.
I love it. I love it.
I
You
love
know,
it too.
the thing is so great is, you know, I'm in tears most of the time when I'm listening to them because I'm just blown away at how powerful they can speak if you give them the space and to be able to authentically speak themselves with no judgment, no criticism, just to you know, say what's there for you. And when they do, it's like wow, you know, I'm just honored that I can be in that kind of a space to facilitate those kinds of conversations. And that's not to say that the adult conversations aren't as great as well, because
Right.
they are as well, because you get to see people really getting their lives inside of the offerings that we have. So we have the annual event, which is one offering that we do in August. We also have the prerequisite. We also have a community program that we're making available to communities. Uh, the communities have to request it, but we'll come out and we'll support them in their conversations around transformation and empowerment. And you know, there's probably some other programs that are there to be developed because we've got a body of work that really allows us to really, for me, to go into any industry, any field, and really make a difference and move the conversation forward. And you know, I'm just excited to be part of that conversation. I heard the conversation in the beginning. I was moved to walk into a room of 120 people who didn't know each other, but were all there with a commitment, a consistent commitment to bring transformation to the Black community, and wasn't restricted to the U.S. or North America, but the Black community around the world. And we've been delivering that kind of conversation for youth, for young adults, and for adults around the world. Um, that's why I'm still part of the organization. I'm still actively facilitating, and you know, working towards that vision, working towards health, wealth, and abundance available for all. And I believe that that is possible. And if we work together, there's nothing that we can't do together.
Thank you so much, Glenn. Thank you so much for being here, for being our interview guest this month. Thank you.
You're
And thank you
welcome.
for everything that you've done since the very inception of the organization to support the organization, its creation, its development, its ongoing management, and for supporting the Youth Summit and being a lead for the Youth Summit for all of these years and everything that you've made available to the youth who have come through and who are now, I mean, we have no idea the ripples that they are creating, the openings that have were initiated by their participation in the Youth Summit, and for adults, their participation in the Adult Summit. I just really appreciate you as
Thank you.
my teammate on the
Yes.
podcast, and I appreciate everything that you have done and everything you do and be for the International Black Summit. So I have one final question for you.
Yes. All right.
The final question is, and this is one we often ask many of our interview guests, and that is, what are three wishes that you have for the world right now? What are three wishes that you have for the world right now?
Well, you know, the standard would be world peace, but it's actually deeper than that. It's for us to realize that we're all connected, no separation. So that's one wish. And that this whole conversation of um, wealth distribution, to flatline that so that everybody has access to everything they need. And then what would be my third wish? I guess my third wish is that we would take care of the planet even better than we take care of our bodies. If we treated the planet, like an extension of our body, how would we treat the planet? So those would be my three wishes, because I'm very connected to nature. I love being out in nature, connecting with the animals, and I've been. What did Shakesha call me? She called me Ranger Glenn, Ranger Bob. Um, but I love being out in the world with nature. I love being with people. And so that whole connectedness, connected to everybody being connected to each other. We wouldn't need wars. We wouldn't need, the strife and the struggle. And if we weren't concerned about wealth and taking care of providing for our, basic needs, then, we'd be in a euphoric world where we just, you know, enjoy ourselves, have fun, be connected, and a joyous environment. So, anyway, those are my three.
I love it. Those were three great wishes for the world. May your three wishes come true. What a
Absolutely.
beautiful world that would create.
Yes, it would.
Thank you again for being with us
My
tonight.
pleasure.
It was
My
a
pleasure. Thank you.
my pleasure. And thank you all who are listening or who are watching on our YouTube channel. Thank you for being with us. We hope you'll join us next time. Good
And
night.
our website is
Oh, our website is blacksummit.org, blacksummit.org. You can check us out there. You can also check out our YouTube channel and our social media presence, Facebook and uh, Twitter and whatever other
all the
pages.
places that we
All
appear.
of the places, all of the places. Check us out. See you next time. Good night.